Our affirmation this morning, I behold the Christ in you. And I'm sure we found ourselves in a situation where it was a challenge to behold the Christ in somebody. I've talked with people, and a lot of people know that I'm involved in the church and the spiritual leader here. And people come to me and they will mention some of their challenges and difficulties. They have a boss or a spouse or somebody they call friend who seems to delight in criticisms and put-downs. And so you tell them when you're talking to them and you're saying, well, you need to behold the Christ in them. The Christ in you needs to behold the Christ in them. And a lot of times people just look at you and, what do you know? And walk away. Because these are challenging circumstances when you're trying your best to be this Christ-like person and adhere to a lot of our New Thought studies and see the Christ in someone else. And I've even heard at times the admonition, well, I'm only human. I can't be expected to be Christ-like and see the Christ in another person when I'm only human myself. So I'm going to only see that cut down or that criticism or, somebody delighting in being mean to me or somebody getting a laugh in a crowd at a moment with me as the butt of the joke at the expense because it's funny. All these things are hurtful. And people's response is, this person hurt me. How can I be this bigger person and see the Christ in them? We're students. We're all in the process of studying and learning. And we get presented with these situations by somebody who looks to you for leadership and who says, well, I'm only human. How can I be expected to see the Christ in this person who has hurt me or who's insulted me or who's made me look the fool in front of a group of friends or colleagues? And so you stand back and you try to come up with the words or the wisdom to let them know. And one of the main things that we sometimes forget, because we live this human existence, is that we aren't just human beings, we're also spiritual beings. And so we need to stand back and look at the situation from our spiritual self. And in fact, our question today is, am I approaching life as a human being or as a spiritual being? Because a lot of times we live in this real world, we live the human experience, and so as we walk our path in life, we encounter these situations where people are unkind to us or they're critical or they're putting us down, and our first reaction is to be human and respond as a human being and either say something negative back or turn and walk away or do anything but stop and see the Christ in that person with the Christ in us. We know that that's a very common saying in our New Thought fellowship as well, is the Christ in me beholds the Christ in you. So our affirmation again, I behold the Christ in you. So as you're beholding the Christ in other people, it's very important to remember that we're spiritual beings and that it is the Christ in you that needs to behold the Christ in them. So there are times when we need to stand back and say, yes, we're human beings, but we're also spiritual beings, and behold the Christ in the person who is criticizing you or who's giving you the slight or who's put you down or in whatever way they've upset you, because we know that happens a lot in life. People upset us, and it's hard to stand back and be the person who is going to behold the Christ in them in these circumstances and situations. I was reading some of the older Unity magazines the other evening as I was preparing for today, and an interesting article really caught my attention. It was about secondhand being the best, the secondhand being the best. And what that referred to was there was a woman, and she was in a situation where she was on a committee with someone else, and they had a disagreement about the way some funding was going to be for the PTA or something like that. And so they were both pretty vocal in the meeting about their differing opinions, and they sort of stormed off and left. And the woman who wrote the article had noted that, she was staunchly set. This other woman was going to be her enemy for life. She was never going to be friends with her again. She was never going to work with her on any committees. And she later commented, as she was hearing that this other woman that she'd had the disagreement about was talking about her behind her back to other people. but she was saying wonderful complimentary things. And so the woman who wrote the article said, well, I just can't believe that she would be talking nice behind my back. How on earth can I hold a grudge against somebody who's talking nice behind my back? And of course, she heard this secondhand. She wasn't there, but this was such a compliment to her. And I think that we all have that option in life when we know that we can overhear somebody talking about a circumstance or a situation, and it's complimentary, to repeat it, to repeat that compliment, so the person hears it secondhand. One of the other circumstances and situations that had occurred with the woman who wrote the article, she had written a lot of articles in New Thought publications, and she had one day decided that she just felt like she was unappreciated and she was going to discontinue writing. And it just so happened a couple days later, a neighbor came over, and she was kind of reluctant to open the door, but she saw she had a cup in her hand, so she was going to borrow something, so she did open the door. And it turned out that the neighbor had been talking to her sister, who had read an article written by this particular writer, and the editor in that magazine had mentioned the town that she was from, and so she had asked her sister, do you know this person? And she said, yes, she's my neighbor. And so the writer's neighbor was expounding, saying, my sister just loved your article, it meant so much. And so this, of course, also was a second-hand compliment. And so it completely changed our writer's opinion about giving up writing, knowing that there were people out there who were enjoying her writings. And there's things that all of us do every day in every situation and circumstance, and we don't always realize the far-reaching effects it's going to have. But the more important thing is, when we do hear something nice, to go ahead and pass it on. Let's be the purveyor of these secondhand compliments, because they do go out into the world. And that is a wonderful way to behold the Christ in someone, by letting this happen. We've probably all read, there have been studies done that people who have a bad experience are more likely to tell 10 people about it, whereas when you have a good experience, you're not as likely to repeat it at all. And that's kind of a tragic thing. If we go and eat somewhere and our food comes on time and nothing is spilled and we don't get overcharged, we just chalk it up to a good experience. But if we go and they got the order wrong and they overcharged us and the waitress knocked the beverage over on us, we're probably going to run around and tell 10 people about that. But the good experience, the thing that went without any uneventful experience, we don't mention. And so, again, this is a way to see the Christ in somebody else, see the Christ in all situations. Don't be afraid to repeat it. Put that good, wonderful energy out there. Don't be the purveyor of the negative. Be the purveyor of the positive. And our question again is, am I approaching life as a human being or a spiritual being? So a lot of times we've got to look beyond that boss or that neighbor or that relative who's critical or who does nothing but put you down. Use your spiritual side to see them. And if you have the opportunity, be even the second-hand deliverer of the good compliment. And be like our writer who found that she couldn't in any way hold a grudge against the person who was talking nice about her behind her back, even though they'd had this public altercation. So in every circumstance, in every situation, approach it as a spiritual being, because we know that as truth students, that certainly is one of the things that's going to get us further along our path of education, is realizing that there is a Christ in everyone, no matter what circumstance or situation is being presented, no matter how mean or nasty they're being. Look beyond that with your spiritual being and see that indeed the Christ in you can behold the Christ in every other person.